Welcome back. A lot of news concerning Asia today. U.S. delegation is in Beijing as we speak for trade talks as both sides try to come to some sort of an agreement. Now, the trade war between the world's two largest economies, it has world markets and it's starting to hurt China's economy, and we're even seeing some damage even stateside. Then, of course, we have North Korea. President Trump says the U.S. is negotiating a second summit with Kim Jong-un. The president says things are going great. Just take a listen.
Just got a great letter from Kim Jong-un, and those few people that I've shown this letter to, they've never written letters like that. This letter is a great letter. We've made a lot of progress with North Korea and Kim Jong-un. Chairman Kim has been, we've really established a very good relationship.
A beautiful letter. So this, although does not seem to be reciprocated across the pond, if you will, Kim doesn't sound so friendly. Here he is on state TV through the voice of a translator.
If the U.S. does not keep the promise it made in front of the world and misinterprets our people's patience and makes one-sided demands and continues down the path of sanctions and pressure on our republic, then we have no choice but to defend our country's sovereignty and supreme interest and find a new way to settle peace on our peninsula.
So there's that. A lot to talk about, and let's bring in our guest, Gordon Chang. He's author of The Coming Collapse of China, as well as also the book, Nuclear Showdown, North Korea Takes on the World. Gordon, thank you for the time. I appreciate it.
Oh, well, thank you.
Well, clearly there was and is a trade imbalance with China, a lot of intellectual property that rightfully the administration says U.S. has been taken advantage of for a long time. That said, I've spoken to a lot of people say, okay, fine, you got a legitimate argument on trade, but there doesn't seem to be a coherent strategy as it relates to what we want and how we intend to get there. Even if you agree that there's an argument to be made, are you clear what our strategy is as it relates to the Chinese and trade?
Well, the strategy and the goal is to get the Chinese to stop stealing U.S. intellectual property to the tune of hundreds of billions of dollars a year, and also to get them to stop their predatory trade practices. Now, how we do that is very difficult. There's a lot of disagreement in the U.S., but you do have to make things unpleasant for China, and that's what the Trump administration has been doing. I think that they need to do much more, but many people think they need to do a lot less. But I do think there is a coherent strategy there.
Let me pivot now to North Korea, and we just showed the clip of the president talking glowingly about this wonderful letter received from the premier of North Korea. But conversely, you know, saying he's got patience that's limited. He wants these sanctions dropped. There's been no evidence that there's been follow through in Pyongyang on cutting down and removing the nuclear program or denuclearizing. In fact, we're seeing counterintelligence that they're basically just moving the deck chairs. Where does this go from here? And really, who has more leverage to this point?
Well, President Trump clearly wants a second summit with Kim Jong-un, and they're planning to do that within months. I think that's an extremely bad idea because, as you point out, the North Koreans have not demonstrated a willingness to give up their weapons. What they have done is they've used the period since the June 2018 summit to upgrade their missile facilities, to upgrade their Yongbin nuclear complex, and to produce more fissile material. So, you know, what they have occurred since that time has not shown that they've made a fundamental decision to give up their weapons. And that is the assumption of the Trump administration. The Kim family is actually, again, getting the better of the United States.
I spoke last segment with an expert as it relates with our drawdown or non-drawdown as it relates to Syria. But a lot of people missed some of the other, at least allusions, which was it won't just be limited to Syria. Maybe it's Afghanistan. Maybe it's even South Korea and our footprint there. If you're in North Korea right now, why don't you just say to yourself, let me see how this plays out, given how peripatetic things are in the Oval right now. Maybe the president will actually draw down our presence in South Korea, changing the entire dynamic there as well. What's the incentive? Other than I grant you, on these sanctions, for the North Koreans to just say, who knows what this guy's going to do next?
Yeah, well, President Trump could try and break the U.S.-South Korea Mutual Defense Treaty and take our 28,500 service personnel off the peninsula. That's entirely possible. As a matter of fact, the negotiations with Seoul over the cost sharing have broken down. But if you're Kim Jong-un, you might look at Syria and get the opposite lesson, and that is the U.S. is trying to reduce its exposure to the Middle East, which means it could concentrate its military assets where it really counts, in East Asia. So, at this particular time, if I were Kim Jong-un, I would think that there are a number of downsides to the strategy that you just outlined.
And let me bring it back full circle to China. Clearly, China will play a major role here in how whatever gets resolved or doesn't with the North Koreans. If on one hand we're trying, and I think reasonably so, to squeeze them in terms of fair trade, but yet we need the Chinese to play a role of some kind with the North Koreans, are we in one hand squeezing while the other hand asking the Chinese?
Yeah, I mean, that's exactly what we're doing. But, most American policymakers think, you got to be nice to the Chinese and they will reciprocate. And that has been the fundamental basis of 4 decades of American policy towards Beijing. Well, it doesn't work that way. When you want to get something from the Chinese, you got to impose such great costs that they have no choice but to give you what you want. And by the way, Chinese are challenging the United States across the board. We do not have the luxury to say this year we'll just deal with trade and we'll talk about North Korea the next, and the year after that we'll talk about Huawei. We've got to deal with China's multifaceted challenges all at once. So they're not leaving us any choice. This is going to be a very difficult period for us, and we're going to have to rethink the way that we deal with the Chinese, because obviously the way we have been dealing with them so far has failed miserably.
Gordon, I appreciate the time. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right, everybody, when we come back, we're going to switch gears. In fact, we're going to talk some sports here. We got a preview of tonight's college football championship and an amazing day in football yesterday as well. All that after this.